The Apache woman yelled in shock. "Cowboy, what are you doing with that rattlesnake?" The desert stretched wide and quiet under the burning sun, a place where the sky felt too big and the earth too still. The land rolled in soft waves of sand, stone, and dry grass, broken only by low hills and scattered rocks. Heat shimmered in the air, making distant shapes dance and blur. In this vast space, a lone cowboy moved slowly, guiding a small herd of cattle across the open ground. His hat was pulled low, his shirt darkened with sweat, and his face showed the signs of many long days under the sun. He had traveled this land before, but every journey across the desert demanded respect. One mistake could cost a life. The cowboy's name did not matter much here. In the desert, names were less important than awareness. He had grown used to silence, to the steady sound of hooves and the creak of leather. The cattle followed him without protest, tired but calm. He kept his eyes forward, watching the ground for holes and sharp stones. Yet fatigue had settled into his bones. The heat pressed down on him, making his thoughts slow. He told himself that once he reached the next water stop he would rest. Until then he pushed on. Not far away, hidden among the tall grass and rocks, an Apache woman moved with quiet purpose. She had lived on this land since childhood and knew its patterns well. She could read the ground like a story, noticing signs that others missed. That morning she had come alone to gather plants used for medicine and food. She walked carefully, placing her feet where the earth was firm, always listening. The desert spoke in soft sounds, the wind brushing against grass, the distant call of a bird, the faint rustle of small animals. She respected these signs, knowing they could mean safety or danger. As the sun climbed higher, the cowboy guided his cattle toward a dry creek bed, hoping to follow its path to lower ground. The land dipped slightly, offering a bit of shade near the rocks. He dismounted to give his horse a break and stepped closer to the edge of the creek. His boots crunched on gravel as he bent down to check the ground. His mind wandered to thoughts of water, food, and rest. For just a moment, he forgot how quickly the desert could turn against him. The Apache woman saw the danger before he did. From her position, she noticed the pattern in the sand, a coiled shape, still and tense. A rattlesnake lay close to the cowboy's boot, its body blending almost perfectly with the ground. Its rattle was quiet, a warning meant for those who listened closely. The snake felt threatened, ready to strike if the large shape moved any closer. The woman's breath caught in her throat. She knew how fast a rattlesnake could move, how little time there was to react. Without stopping to think about fear or old divisions, she shouted. Her voice cut sharply through the heavy air. "Cowboy, what are you doing with that rattlesnake?" The sound echoed across the rocks and grass. The cowboy froze, startled by the sudden voice and the words that made no sense to him at first. His heart jumped and his hand moved without thinking. He looked down, following the direction of the warning. That was when he saw it, the snake, coiled and ready only inches away. Time seemed to slow. He felt the heat of fear rush through him, sharper than the sun. He had faced danger before, but this was too close, too sudden. Carefully, just as he had been taught long ago, he pulled his foot back, slow and steady. The rattlesnake lifted its head slightly, watching him, then slid away into the grass once it felt the threat had passed. The cowboy stood still for a long moment, breathing hard. When he finally looked up, he saw the woman standing a short distance away. She was calm but alert, her eyes steady. He realized that without her warning, the outcome could have been very different. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The desert returned to its quiet state, as if nothing unusual had happened. The cattle shifted and snorted softly behind him. The cowboy removed his hat and wiped his forehead, more from shock than heat. "Thank you," he said at last, his voice rough. "I didn't see it." The woman nodded. "The ground hides many things," she replied. Her voice was firm but not unkind. "You must watch where you step." He studied her carefully, unsure what to say next. He had grown up hearing stories that painted people like her as enemies, but the woman before him did not match those tales. She had not threatened him or shown anger. She had saved his life. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said. "I'm just passing through." She looked at the cattle, then back at him. "This land is not empty," she said simply. "It belongs to the earth and to those who listen to it." Her words stayed with him. He realized how little attention he had paid to the smaller signs around him. He had been thinking only of his goal, not of the dangers along the way. The desert did not forgive such thinking. A hot wind moved through the grass, carrying dust and the smell of dry earth. The woman stepped closer, pointing to the ground where the snake had been. She showed him the marks, the way the sand had shifted. "These signs are always there," she said, "but you must slow down to see them." He nodded, feeling both humbled and grateful. He had traveled far, but in that moment he felt like a beginner again. The land had taught him a lesson, using the voice of a stranger. As the sun began its slow descent, casting longer shadows across the desert, the cowboy realized that this meeting was more than chance. A single shout had changed the course of his day, perhaps even his life. He mounted his horse again, more careful now, his eyes scanning the ground with new respect. The woman watched him prepare to leave. She returned to her gathering, knowing that the desert would continue as it always had, quiet, dangerous, and fair to those who listened. The rattlesnake, the warning, and the shared moment of understanding lingered in the air, marking the beginning of a story shaped by awareness and respect. The desert did not choose sides. It simply existed, waiting for those who walked upon it to learn its rules. The cowboy stayed where he was for a while, letting his breathing return to normal. His heart was still beating fast, and his hands felt unsteady. He had come very close to danger, closer than he liked to admit. When he finally spoke again, his voice was softer than before, carrying real respect. "I owe you," he said, looking at the Apache woman. "If you hadn't shouted, I might not be standing here." She did not smile, but there was no hardness in her face. "The land warned you," she replied. "I only spoke what it was already saying." Her words were simple, yet they stayed with him. He had spent most of his life riding across open spaces, believing he understood nature. But now he saw that understanding went deeper than long rides and strong horses. It required patience and attention. The woman remained at a careful distance, not stepping too close, not stepping away. She watched his movements, the way he handled himself after the scare. Many men reacted with anger or fear after such moments, but this cowboy only seemed thoughtful. That told her something about him. The cattle shifted again, one of them lowing softly. The sound broke the quiet, reminding both of them that time was still moving forward. The cowboy glanced back at the herd, then returned his attention to the woman. "I didn't expect to meet anyone out here," he said honestly. "This land feels empty when you ride alone." She shook her head slowly. "It is never empty," she said. "You only think so when you do not know who walks it." He considered this. "I guess I've been guilty of that," he admitted. "I've been moving too fast." The woman studied his face. She could see the lines of tiredness, the signs of long days under the sun. He was not young, but not old either. Life had shaped him through work and loss, just as it had shaped her through tradition and survival. "You are tired," she said. "Tired people make mistakes." He gave a small, quiet laugh. "That's true," he replied. "I was thinking more about water and shade than what was under my feet." She pointed toward a cluster of rocks not far away. "There is a place where the sun does not strike so hard," she said. "You and your animals can rest for a short time." The cowboy hesitated. Accepting help from her felt unfamiliar, even risky by the standards he had grown up with. But refusing would be foolish and disrespectful. She had already proven she meant no harm. "I'd appreciate that," he said. "Thank you." They walked slowly toward the rocks, keeping a careful eye on the ground. The woman moved with ease, her steps light and sure. The cowboy followed, copying her pace. He noticed how she paused now and then, listening, watching. He began to do the same. When they reached the shade, the air felt cooler. The cowboy let his horse drink from a small water pouch and checked the cattle, making sure they were calm. He then sat on a flat stone, removing his hat again. Sweat dried on his skin as a breeze passed through. The woman sat across from him, placing the plants she had gathered into a cloth bundle. Her movements were careful and respectful, as if each plant mattered. "You know this land very well," the cowboy said. She nodded. "It teaches us from the time we can walk," she replied. Those who listen live longer. He looked out at the desert, seeing it differently now. What once seemed like empty space now felt full of quiet signs and hidden life. "I've heard many stories," he said slowly. "Most of them were told by people who never took the time to understand." She met his eyes. "Stories can be dangerous," she said. "They can make fear grow where it does not belong." Her words struck him deeply. He realized how much fear he had carried without questioning it. Yet here they were, sharing shade and water, speaking calmly like two people shaped by the same harsh world. "I'm glad you spoke up," he said again. "Not many would." She looked away briefly, then back at him. "Silence can also be dangerous," she said. "Sometimes a voice must rise, even if it surprises." The desert around them remained still, but the tension between them had faded. In its place was something quieter, stronger, understanding. After resting for a while, the cowboy stood and prepared to move on. He felt more alert now, more aware of his surroundings. Before mounting his horse, he turned to the woman. "I'll remember this," he said. "Not just the snake, but the lesson." She gave a small nod. "The land remembers too," she said. As he rode away, guiding his cattle with renewed care, he knew this encounter would stay with him. Fear had turned into respect, and respect into understanding. In the wide desert, two paths had crossed, and both walkers had learned something they would carry forward long after the dust settled. The cowboy rode on with a calmer mind, but he did not travel far before the desert reminded him that rest can be short and plans can change. Dark clouds began to gather slowly on the far edge of the sky. At first they looked thin and harmless, like light brush marks across blue, but as time passed they grew heavier and closer, blocking the sun little by little. The air changed too. The wind became cooler and carried a sharp smell of dust and rain. The woman noticed it at the same time. She stood still, looking toward the horizon, reading the signs in the sky the way others read words on a page. This kind of storm did not announce itself loudly. It crept in quietly, then arrived with strength. "You should not go much farther," she said, raising her voice slightly so it could carry. "The storm will reach this land before night." The cowboy slowed his horse and looked up. He had seen storms before, but in this open desert, shelter was rare. Rain could turn dry ground into slippery mud, and strong wind could scatter cattle in minutes. "I was hoping to reach lower ground," he said, "but I don't want to risk losing the herd." She pointed toward a rocky rise not far away. "There are stones there," she said. "They will break the wind." He trusted her judgment now. Without arguing, he guided the cattle toward the rocks. The clouds rolled closer and the light grew dimmer. By the time they reached the shelter, the first drops of rain touched the ground, darkening the dust. They settled in among the rocks, finding a place where the wind passed overhead instead of through. The cattle huddled close together, uneasy but safe. The cowboy tied his horse and checked every animal, moving with care. The woman stood nearby, watching the sky and the land, as calm as if this were an ordinary moment. Soon the rain came harder, tapping against stone and earth. It was not a gentle rain, but not harsh either. It filled the air with sound, washing dust from the ground and cooling the heat that had built all day. They waited together in silence for a while, listening. The cowboy realized how rare this moment was. Two strangers, raised in very different ways, sharing shelter from the same storm. The desert did not care who they were. It treated them equally. After some time, the cowboy spoke. "I've spent years out here," he said, but I don't think I ever truly learned this place." The woman looked at him. "Learning never ends," she said. "Even for those born to it." He nodded. "Back where I grew up, people talked about strength," he said. "About taking land, winning fights, surviving by force. But out here, force doesn't seem to matter much." She picked up a small stone and rolled it in her palm. "The land is stronger than any person," she said. "Those who fight it lose, those who listen live." Her words were simple, but they carried weight. He thought of the rattlesnake again, how close danger had been. Strength would not have saved him then, only awareness had. The storm continued, steady and patient. Water trickled down the rocks, forming small paths in the dirt. The smell of wet earth filled the air. The woman began to sort through her bundle of plants, checking which ones had stayed dry. "These are for healing," she said, noticing his curious look. "Some ease pain, some help with sickness." "You're a healer?" he asked. She shook her head. "I only know what was taught to me," she replied. "Knowledge is shared, not owned." He liked that thought. In his world, knowledge was often kept close, used as advantage. Here, it was something passed on so others could survive. As the storm slowly weakened, the sky lightened again. The rain softened, then faded into scattered drops. The desert began to breathe once more. Steam rose faintly from the ground where the sun returned. When the clouds finally moved away, the woman stood and looked around carefully. Storms often brought new dangers, shifted ground, hidden holes, disturbed animals. As if the land wished to test them again, a familiar sound reached their ears. A soft, warning rattle came from nearby. The cowboy felt his muscles tighten. His heart jumped, but this time he did not panic. He stayed still, remembering what he had learned. He looked toward the sound and spotted another rattlesnake near the edge of the rocks, resting where the rain had cooled the ground. The woman raised her hand slightly, signaling him to remain calm. She stepped slowly to the side, keeping distance, her movements smooth and unthreatening. The snake watched, then turned and slipped away into a crack between stones. The cowboy released a breath he did not realize he had been holding. He looked at the woman, a quiet understanding passing between them. Fear had not controlled him this time, trust had. "You remembered," she said. "Because you showed me," he replied. They shared a brief moment of silence, one filled not with tension but respect. The storm had passed, and so had another test. Soon it was time to move again. The cattle were restless, eager to continue. The cowboy felt changed, not in a dramatic way, but in a deeper one. His steps were slower, his eyes sharper. He no longer rushed. As they walked out from the shelter, the desert looked different. The colors were richer after the rain. Greens appeared where there had only been brown. Life, hidden but strong, revealed itself for a moment. The cowboy realized that this shared struggle against the storm had tied them together, even if only briefly. They were both children of the same harsh land, shaped by it in different ways but tested by it equally. And as they continued forward, the rattlesnake, the rain, and the quiet lessons of the desert followed them, reminding them that survival was not about dominance, but balance. The ground felt different after the storm. What had once been hard and dusty was now soft in places, marked with fresh lines where water had moved through the land. The cowboy guided his cattle carefully, watching each step. The woman walked a short distance ahead, her eyes moving from ground to sky, from rocks to grass. She had warned him before that storms often changed more than the air. They changed the paths, the signs, and sometimes the balance between safety and danger. They had not gone far when the cowboy noticed something was wrong. One of the cattle at the back was missing. He counted again, slow and careful. The number did not change. One animal was gone. He felt a tight pull in his chest. Losing a single animal could mean trouble. It could slow him down, cost him money, or force him to turn back. He turned his horse in a small circle, scanning the land, hoping the animal was just hidden by rocks or brush. "I'm missing one," he said. The woman stopped and looked at him. "How long ago did you last see it?" Before the storm, he replied. It must have wandered when the rain came. She nodded, already moving toward the edge of the rocky shelter. Then the tracks will still be fresh. He hesitated. In his world, searching alone was safer. Asking for help felt strange, especially now, when every old habit told him to hurry and solve the problem himself. But he remembered the rattlesnake, the storm, and the calm way she read the land. "I'd be grateful for your help," he said honestly. She did not answer with words. She simply knelt near the ground and began to study the soil. Her fingers hovered just above the surface, never disturbing it. She followed faint marks that the cowboy would have missed completely. "The animal was frightened," she said after a moment. "It ran, not walked." She pointed toward a low stretch of land where grass grew thicker. "That way." They moved slowly, careful not to erase the signs they followed. The cowboy watched closely, learning. He noticed how she read broken grass, how she saw meaning in small details. A bent stem, a pressed stone, a disturbed patch of mud. As they walked, the land tested them again. The sun returned with strength, pulling heat from the wet ground. Steam rose in soft waves. Insects hummed. Life stirred everywhere. Then the woman stopped suddenly. The cowboy froze too, remembering her earlier warning. He followed her gaze and saw another rattlesnake stretched across their path, warming itself after the rain. It was larger than the others they had seen. Its body was thick, its colors deep against the damp earth. Fear tried to rise in him, sharp and quick, but he held it back. He did not reach for anything. He did not move suddenly. He trusted what he had learned. "What do we do?" he asked quietly. "We wait," she said, "and give it space." They stood still, the desert holding its breath with them. The rattlesnake lifted its head slightly, aware but not threatened. After a long moment, it slid away into the grass, leaving only a faint mark behind. The cowboy let out a slow breath. He realized then how much he had changed in such a short time. Before, he might have acted without thought. Now, patience felt natural. They continued on, finding the missing animal not far ahead. It stood near a small patch of green, calm but tired. The cowboy felt relief wash over him. "Thank you," he said again. The words felt deeper this time. The woman nodded. "Trust brings balance," she replied. As they turned back toward the herd, the cowboy noticed something else. The way he saw the land had shifted. It was no longer just a place to cross. It felt alive, filled with quiet rules and unspoken agreements. They reached the cattle and the cowboy secured the missing animal. He checked each one carefully, making sure none were hurt. When he was done, he turned to the woman. "I don't know how to repay you," he said. She looked at him steadily. "Carry what you learned," she said. "That is enough." They stood there for a moment, the desert stretching wide around them. The storm clouds were gone now, leaving behind a clean blue sky. The land seemed calm again, but they both knew calm did not mean safe. It meant ready. The cowboy mounted his horse, preparing to move on. He felt stronger, not because of muscle or tools, but because of understanding. He tipped his hat toward the woman, a simple gesture filled with meaning. She watched him ride away, knowing that trust had been tested and proven. The desert returned to its quiet rhythm, holding the marks of their footsteps, the memory of danger, and the lesson that survival is shared between those who listen. The sun was beginning to lower when the cowboy guided his cattle forward again. The light had changed, turning softer and warmer, painting the desert in calm colors. Long shadows stretched across the ground, and the heat no longer pressed down so hard. The land felt quieter now, as if it had finished testing him for the day. He rode slowly, no longer rushing. Every step of his horse was measured. His eyes moved often from the horizon to the ground, from the cattle to the rocks ahead. The lessons he had learned stayed close in his mind. He felt different, not just tired but thoughtful. Something inside him had shifted. The woman walked with him for a short distance, then stopped near a rise in the land. She pointed toward a path that led away from the cattle trail. "This is where I turn back," she said. The cowboy pulled his horse to a stop. For a moment he did not speak. Words felt small compared to what had passed between them. A warning shout had grown into shared danger, shared patience, and shared trust. "I won't forget today," he said finally. "Not the storm, not the snakes, not you." She met his eyes, calm and steady. "The land remembers all footsteps," she said, "even when people do not." He nodded, understanding more than the words alone. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small water pouch. He offered it to her without thinking. She accepted it with a slight nod, then handed him a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "For the road," she said. "If you listen, it will help you." He did not ask what was inside. He trusted that it carried meaning beyond its shape. He placed it carefully among his things. They stood there in silence, the desert breathing around them. No promises were made. None were needed. Then the woman turned and walked away, her steps light and sure, blending into the land as naturally as the wind or the shadows. The cowboy watched until she was gone from sight. He guided his cattle forward again, alone but not empty. The desert no longer felt like a space to cross quickly. It felt like a place to move through with care. As night began to approach, he found a place to rest. He settled the cattle, checked each one, and made sure they were calm. He sat near a small fire, watching the sky darken. Stars began to appear, one by one, bright and clear. He thought about his past journeys, about the times he had ridden without looking, without listening. He realized how close he had come to danger many times without knowing it. Survival, he now understood, was not only about strength or speed. It was about awareness. The desert night was cool and quiet. Somewhere in the distance, an animal called softly. The sound did not bring fear. It brought balance. The cowboy held the small cloth bundle in his hand, feeling its weight. He remembered the woman's words. "Knowledge is shared, not owned. Trust brings balance." He slept lightly that night, waking often, alert but calm. When morning came, he rose with the sun. The desert greeted him as it always had, wide and silent, unchanged and yet always new. He continued his journey in the days that followed, carrying the lessons with him. He avoided danger by noticing small signs. He rested when needed. He treated the land with respect. Sometimes, when he saw a mark in the sand or heard a soft sound in the grass, he remembered the warning shout that had saved his life. He remembered that silence is not always safe, and that courage can come from unexpected places. The desert stretched on, endless and fair, and the cowboy moved through it differently now, not as a conqueror but as a listener.